morning to you all, and thank you all for joining us on this Friday, April 24th. Coming to you live from Seoul, I'm Shin Se-min. At the top of the hour, these are the stories making headlines. South Korea and the U.S. are reportedly holding a joint military air exercises, one that had been postponed last year as Washington had wanted to lure Pyongyang back to the negotiating table for talks. U.S. President Donald Trump calls on reports on North Korean leader Kim Jong-un incorrect. This on top of Washington's top diplomats saying that Washington's goal remains unchanged no matter who is in control of the regime. Plus, labor ministers of the G20 nations speak on ways to ease the coronavirus impact on both the domestic and global job market. This as South Korea and the U.S. have already posted depressing job numbers. U.S. President Donald Trump says reports surrounding North Korean leader Kim Jong-un appear to be incorrect, while declining to answer on whether his administration had been in contact with the North in recent days. Here's Trump during a daily White House coronavirus briefing on Thursday, local time.
I just have to say to Kim Jong-un, I wish him very, good luck. Good luck. I mean, they came out with very, very serious medical reports. Nobody's confirmed that. It was CNN that came out. So when CNN comes out with a report, I don't place too much credence in it.
He added that the reports used old documents and that they are incorrect. Trump added that regardless of the accuracy of the news, he wishes Kim well. Staying with that, U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo says Washington will continue to push for North Korea's denuclearization, regardless of who leads the regime. Asked on Fox News about how comfortable he'd be dealing with North Korean leader Kim Jong-un's younger sister, Kim Yo-jong, if she took control, Pompeo responded by saying, quote, "The challenge and the goal remains unchanged." He added that whoever is leading, the U.S. wants them to give up their nuclear program, wants them to join the League of Nations and provide a brighter future for the North Korean people. And he again called for the regime's complete denuclearization. Pompeo's comments come amid a storm of speculation over Kim Jong-un's health conditions, with some even suggesting that his sister could be a potential successor. South Korea and the United States are conducting their annual combined air exercises this week, aimed at improving the execution of their joint operations. The drills, an apparent warning to North Korea, were postponed last year as Washington had been attempting to coax the regime back to the negotiating table, efforts that fell on deaf ears. Our Kim Hyo-sun with more.
Seoul and Washington have convened their combined air exercises annual drills that were skipped over in 2019. The allies decided to postpone their air exercises last November as a goodwill gesture from the U.S. to encourage North Korea to return to stalled nuclear talks. The drills, which have been taking place from Monday and wrap up Friday, appear to be targeting Pyongyang following the regime's continued missile testing. A South Korean Air Force official says the length and size of the exercises are on par with previous years, adding these are annual typical combined drills aimed at improving the execution of joint operations between Seoul and Washington. South Korea's F-15K, KF-16 fighter jets and America's F-16s are taking part this year. Meanwhile, the U.S. has conducted joint training with Japan by flying its B-1B Lancer, nicknamed the Swan of Death. According to U.S. Air Force Thursday, the bomber teamed up with 4 F-16 fighter jets from the U.S. and 2 F-2 jets from Japan to take part in the bilateral drill, designed to enhance joint capabilities and improve technical skills. Pundits say the drills could be linked to Washington's latest withdrawal of 5 B-52H bombers from Guam, ending the Air Force's 6-month rotations of bombers through the island that had been taking place since 2004. They say Washington has changed its tactic to exercising its military capacity from the continental U.S. rather than stationing its strategic weapons in different parts of the world. Kim Hyo-sun, Arirang News.
And now to the battle against the global COVID-19 outbreak. European countries are starting to take a leaf out of South Korea's book when it comes to mitigating the spread of COVID-19, encouraging their citizens to wear protective face masks while they are outside. People in Europe have generally been fairly resistant to wearing masks, but times might be changing. Our Chang Tae-hyun reports.
A number of European countries are advising their nationals to wear protective face masks in a bid to slow the spread of COVID-19. At first, many people in European countries were reluctant to wear masks, assuming they were for people that were already sick. However, attitudes are shifting. Keeping to social distancing rules is often harder than it sounds, and more people are now aware that COVID-19 can be spread by those who are infected but don't show any symptoms. Germany's 16 states have made face masks compulsory for people riding public transportation as they start loosening lockdown restrictions and taking steps to reopen the German economy.
Workers and customers both have to wear face masks. We also have spare masks for people not wearing them, and only a certain amount of people can come in.
Italy is mulling the idea of making the wearing of face masks on buses, trains, and subways mandatory, but for the time being, it is just advised. Austria, the Czech Republic, and Poland have made the wearing of masks on public transportation mandatory. Other European countries are not compelling, but advising people to wear masks. Spain has started handing out face masks to commuters, while France is planning to provide them to households. The latest data from Worldometers show almost 1.2 million confirmed cases of COVID-19 in Europe. Around 4,600 new COVID-19 cases were confirmed in Spain on Wednesday, raising the overall total to more 46,000. On the same day, the UK confirmed an additional 4,500 cases. The number of new cases in Italy, once the hardest hit country in Europe, dropped on Wednesday to 2,600. Chang Tae-hyun, Arirang News.
The labor and employment ministers of G20 nations met on Thursday online to discuss ways to mitigate the impact of COVID-19 on domestic and global labor markets and society in general. Now, this comes as a number of nations, including South Korea and the U.S., are facing historically high unemployment numbers. Our Lee Seung-jae tells us more.
The COVID-19 pandemic has led to an unprecedented challenge that requires a coordinated global response. This is the first line of the G20 Labor and Employment Ministers' statement issued on Thursday, after the ministers discussed ways to cope with the virus's impact on employment across the world. According to the G20 labor ministers, they will come together to develop and implement comprehensive and effective measures to mitigate the impact of COVID-19 on both the domestic and global labor markets and societies, adding that fighting and overcoming the pandemic is their highest and overriding priority. The labor ministers also emphasized that in addition to protecting jobs and income, they will work to ensure social protection systems are sufficiently robust and adaptable to provide adequate support for all workers in need, regardless of their employment status, age, or gender. The task will be tough, as a number of major economies are facing some of the worst unemployment numbers they've ever witnessed. This includes South Korea, which reported its first on-year job loss since the global financial crisis in 2009. South Korea lost some 195,000 jobs last month, marking the sharpest monthly decline since May 2009, when it saw some 240,000 job losses. In addition, the number of employed people taking temporary leave surged by 1.23 million to 1.6 million in April, the sharpest rise since 1983. In the U.S., more than 4.4 million workers filed for unemployment benefits this week, as job cuts continue to soar across an economy that remains all but shut down. Since the COVID-19 outbreak in the U.S. began forcing employers to close their businesses, some 26 million people have filed for jobless aid in the past 5 weeks alone. That's about 1 in 6 American workers who have lost their jobs since mid-March, the worst wave of layoffs on record. Experts predict the U.S. unemployment rate for April could go as high as 20%. Lee Seung-jae, Arirang News.
The United Nations is calling for a global debt deal, which includes massive debt relief for developing countries to prevent an economic catastrophe prompted by the COVID-19 pandemic. On Thursday, the UN's Conference on Trade, Investment and Development called for a grant of $1 trillion in debt relief for the world's poorer nations, as well as an international body to oversee that execution. In Europe, the head of the European Central Bank, Christine Lagarde, warned that the pandemic could cut up to 15% of the EU member states' economic output. Speaking during a video conference on Thursday with the leaders of 27 EU nations, she said their response to the economic fallout was too little and too late. Kuwait says it has already started cutting oil output ahead of May 1st, the date when global suppliers agreed to start slashing production to counter the devastating plunge in crude prices. The oil minister of the fourth biggest OPEC member said Kuwait felt responsibility to respond to market conditions and acted alone. However, we don't know whether Kuwait has reduced production by the full amount it originally pledged to. Kuwait, with that, becomes the first major producer in the Persian Gulf to pump less oil ahead of schedule. The OPEC Plus coalition has previously vowed to cut production by 23% starting May 1st, and that's 9.7 million barrels a day in a bid to stem free-falling oil prices. Top oil producer Saudi Arabia hasn't said it will cut early, while the second biggest producer, Iraq, has also remained tight-lipped. South Korea's tourism industry has suffered losses amounting to some $1.9 billion so far this year due to the COVID-19 outbreak, with the nation's biggest air hub, Incheon International Airport, seeing a whopping 95% drop in traffic. Now, the industry is likely to rebound slightly, considering the seeming stabilization of the virus here in the country, but even that isn't particularly welcoming news. Our Lee Kyung-eun tells us more.
Insadong, located in Seoul's central Jongno-gu district, used to be bustling with foreign travelers wearing hanbok, South Korea's traditional attire. However, given the specter of COVID-19, the streets are now eerily empty.
Last year, we usually had up to 300 visitors a week, with 95% of them being foreigners. These days, we see no foreigners and only about 10 locals.
Since April, the average number of daily entrants at Incheon International Airport is around 4,500, down more than 95% on year. Outbound travelers have also dropped dramatically, just over 1,100, which is only about 1% of last year's record. With that, the industry is enduring an unprecedented crisis. Travel agencies, including the country's two largest companies, Hanator and Motor, have shifted to 3-day working schedules and are encouraging workers to take paid leave.
Tourism is a web of highly interconnected businesses, so even if the situation is safe here, if things are not the same elsewhere, we won't have travelers going overseas, nor do we receive them.
With some $1.9 billion of losses expected so far this year, the Culture Ministry has injected emergency support to help the businesses.
Up to April 20th, we helped 3,099 companies maintain their employees by providing $1,700 each for those who registered.
Now, with the upcoming holiday in May, the industry is faced with yet another dilemma. Business is picking up in some of the most popular tourist hotspots in the country, like the southern island of Jeju and the eastern resort town of Gangneung, with hotels there seeing over 80% reservation rates. But the return of visitors could mean hurting past efforts to contain the virus amid lingering fears about COVID-19. Lee Kyung-eun, Arirang News.
Good morning. The spring chill continues on this Friday. Despite a slight rise in the readings compared to yesterday, temperatures will hover again below the season norms in most regions. But chilly morning temperatures will rise to the mid to upper teens by the afternoon. Dress accordingly. You know, it's always better to wear more layers than feeling cold. Meanwhile, a dry weather advisory has been expanded to more regions, including Seoul, and winds will be strong with a preliminary wind advisory issued for parts of Gangwon-do province. In fact, the Korea Forest Service has issued wildfire advisory to East Coast, so be careful. Good news though, rain is in the forecast for the East Coast and Gangwon-do province on Sunday and next Monday. Now that should help to ease the dryness in the air, while the chilly spring run we've seen will end this weekend. That's Korea for you, and here's the international weather for viewers around the globe.
That's all we have at this hour on Arirang News. As always, thank you for watching and goodbye for now.